I'm from Germany, so we always are a little bit cautious on data collection because we had 80 years ago, there was big problems in this country. So they didn't have computers, lucky. But if they had Facebook or Google or something which collects all the data, it would have been so easy for them to actually find out the people they don't like and put them somewhere where they don't want to be.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Smart Economy podcast, where we ask your favorite builders the questions you wish you could ask yourself. This is a production of neonewstoday.com, and I'm your host, Dylan Grabowski. In this episode, we were joined by Ingo Ruebe, founder of Kilt Protocol, a decentralized identity solution for enterprise, governments, and consumers. In this conversation, we discussed how identity is broken in Web 2 and how decentralization fixes it, how to get people caring about identity solutions, why Kilt is built natively to Polkadot but also builds on Ethereum, Kilt's products as use cases and examples, where ENS got it wrong, and so much more. Just a reminder, nothing said on this podcast is a solicitation to buy or sell any tokens, and that the guest or host might hold tokens discussed in any given episode. You can check out a full disclaimer at www.neonewstoday.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating and reviewing it on your favorite podcasting platform and sharing it with your friends and family. Every rate, review, like, and comment helps us reach more people and bring you more of your favorite guests. With all that said, I really enjoyed speaking with Ingo, and I hope you enjoy the conversation too. Hey everyone, welcome to the Smart Economy podcast. Today we're joined by Ingo Ruebe, the founder of Kilt Protocol, a decentralized digital identity solution for enterprise, governments, and consumers. Excited to have you. How are you doing today, Ingo?
I'm doing absolutely fine. Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm doing great. I think identity is one of those things that is probably one of the least sexy topics in crypto, but it is massively important in our day-to-day lives. So maybe we can just start with a quick, brief overview. Kilt was founded around 2018. What made you want to start working on identity back during the post-ICO bear market?
That's a little bit of history. So my background is I'm a computer scientist and I worked in industry for many years. So the last position I had in industry was a CTO of a big publishing company, really big international one. And I came around blockchain in 2015 on the South by Southwest, by the way, which is starting this week. And there was the Ethereum team speaking there and I got infected immediately. So I thought, okay, this is going to change everything. So I went back to the group board and said, I found a new technology. This is going to change everything. This is really important for us. We have to do something because we say we are a tech and media company, so we have to do something. And then I discussed with them 2 or 3 years, like it is in big companies. And at one point they said, yeah, maybe we should do something, even though we don't really understand it and it's not really very close to our core business. But what about you find us a new CTO and we give you the money to fund the company so that you don't have to talk with VCs and you do whatever blockchain-y thing you deem necessary. So, and I said, okay, this is probably a once in a lifetime chance. So you don't say no to that, right? So they gave me a pot of money. They gave me the people I picked from the departments there in IT. So I could actually run my company. And then we were sitting there on the 1st of January in 2018 and say, now we have the people, we have the money. What are we going to do with it? And then we say, actually, we are industry funded. So we should look for something which is very close to the really boring old industry, and find a segue where blockchain might be useful for them. So in the Web 2, identity is totally broken. I think we all know that. In blockchain, identity is also not really decided how it's going to be. And you could use blockchain for a lot of things because identity is a thing where truth is in. So it sounds a little bit like you should connect the Web 2 and the Web 3 with blockchain. And then we say, okay, we go to identity. This was how we came into identity in 2018.
So 2015, to kind of have an aha moment with Ethereum right away is pretty incredible. Was that the first time you came across blockchain or crypto in 2015, or did you have an introduction in years prior? And then after seeing that presentation at South by Southwest, it kind of clicked for you?
There was a very sad interaction I had in 2012 when I first encountered Bitcoin, maybe 2011, I'm not sure. So the Bitcoin was like $2 at that time. And I said to my wife, hey, this thing there that seems to be important, shall we maybe just buy 10,000 of these things? And she said, no, we're not going into this nerd shit. We need a sofa. Now, we still have a sofa, but 10,000 Bitcoins would have been much better in retrospect.
Definitely more than 10,000 sofas. My experience is similar. I looked at it, I saw the price drop, and then I figured, for another time. I was a broke graduate student at the time, and 4 years later, I finally got into the space. So you mentioned that you had kind of a diversified background. You were working at a media and tech company when you were at that South by Southwest event. Your whole career is a bit diversified, though. You've spanned healthcare, media, energy, and then ultimately culminating in Kilt in 2018. So maybe could you just walk us through your career trajectory and maybe some of the pinpoints you experienced at the different industry that you worked in as it pertains to identity issues that maybe your enterprise or institutional clients might have had, maybe some of the governments you were dealing with, or maybe even some of the consumers that you represented?
Maybe first of all, why did I work in so many fields? I did this on purpose. So to all the kids out there, study computer science. Because when you study computer science, you are able to work in all the verticals, actually, because everyone needs a computer scientist without actually going too deep into the field so that it becomes boring or messy or whatnot. So if you work in hospitals as a computer scientist, you don't have to touch the sick people, right? That's quite nice, actually. But you still learn everything about the process and you can make them better, and you learn a lot about medicine. So you actually get all the knowledge for free, and you can play around there, make it even a little bit better, and then say, hey, actually, how's publishing working? And then go into publishing. So that was my plan of life, to see as much as possible. And this is why I made this diversified career with staying between 3 and 6 years, basically, in one industry and then moving on to the next industry. That was the plan. Of course, in the healthcare industry, you're always confronted with anything about identity and security and personal data and all that. That is really important. And it is also totally an issue still. So we do not really have the data protected as it should be. The medical data, as you probably know, is not sitting with you. It is sitting either with your healthcare provider or it is sitting with your doctors. Sometimes the doctors don't know what the healthcare provider knows, and vice versa. If you run into a complicated situation and you need immediate help, then all your data is definitely not accessible, which is also not good. So there's tons of unsolved problems in there. So I think that is what actually became most obvious to me. Another thing with identity in the publishing industry, that was probably not only in the publishing industry, that was at the time in 2016, 2017, when GDPR came up, which also has to do something with identity and personal data. We noticed that GDPR, just as an explanation, very simply says it's a European regulation, but it's adopted here and there in the world as well. It basically says if you have a company and this company owns or has personal data of person X, then person X can call at any time and say, show me the data. And if they don't like the data, they can even say, delete the data. And then you have to do that. And if you don't do that, you are fined up to 4% of your annual turnover, not of the profit, of the turnover that the company makes. And for a big company, this can very easily go into billions. So there's a very strong protection. But I was working as a CTO at that time. So I had the other side of the problem, say, oh, wow, which data do we have? And this is where I noticed that in big companies, nobody actually knows which data we have. So we actually encountered 126 databases holding different types of personal data. So now if somebody calls and says, delete my data, how can we even have a possibility to find out, or how can we look into 126 databases and see if this person is in there? So that was a project like 2 years. We had to invest a lot. This shows on the other side how lazy and not really thinking we are with personal data, with identity. And that also starts you thinking.
Yeah, so definitely want to dig into a little bit more data concerns here in a minute, but I just want to double click on something that you brought up before we hit record. You're based in the EU right now, and you said that every year it's kind of a decision you have to make between visiting South by Southwest or visiting ETH Denver. ETH Denver just happened, so we don't have a fun little back and forth that we can share on our experiences at the event. But I am curious, why South by Southwest? A lot of folks might recognize that event is kind of a music-oriented event, though in the past decade or so, it's definitely expanded to offer tech conversations, tech-centric debates, panels, workshops. Why is it a keynote event for you every year to debate between going to this or to one of the largest innovation festivals and hackathons?
Yeah, so for me, South by is really standing out because South by very much looks into the future. So, as I said, the blockchain was a topic at South by in 2015. It's not now anymore because this is something which already exists. So why would we talk about it? This is the spirit of South by. We talk about what's going to happen in the next 5 years, not what happened in the last 10 years. They basically said blockchain was interesting or a major topic for them in 2015, 2016, and then it was dead for them. And that is really important for me because I want to know what the future is, because I have to think about this future. I have to understand it. Sometimes it's also crap that you learn, of course, but sometimes it is really important. And what is also really important at the South by is not only that it's really nicely vetted, so you have a lot of really intelligent people on the stage, but you also have all the really important people in the crowd. So very much like everyone who's a decision maker somewhere around the world, like all the CTOs, all the people from the legal departments which have to make the real big decisions, they are all there in the crowd. And every speech that you hear has the possibility to walk up to the mic and ask questions. So I'm interested in getting to know the people who are at the mic actually and asking questions, because I can then stand either behind the guy on the stage and talk with them, or I can go up to the people who just said something. And this is how I make really important, interesting contacts. I don't need a booth there. I just go there myself and I go to the topics where I don't even understand the headline, because that makes sure I'm going to learn something absolutely new. And this is for 7 days or something. So you learn a lot. So then this is a huge event. I think it has like 300,000 people coming, and that's fantastic. And I think for the blockchain people, we have to look a little bit beyond crypto. But we do have a technology which is mostly used in our own ecosystem in a way. Making a meme coin is basically using crypto for making crypto. That's a viable business model. Let's do that. But we always come from the side, okay, what can we actually use it for? Actually, we come from a different side. Where are problems that we can help solving with blockchain? And that is so much more interesting, actually. So I find it really important to go to those, you can call them Web 2 or old people's conferences. I don't know. You really find the decision makers there and you find the time to talk with people, and not only about, hey, can I have some merch? It's very much beyond merch. It's really having discussions and going for a coffee after that and having an hour of meaningful talk. And that very seldomly, unfortunately, happens on crypto conferences. Not saying that crypto conferences you shouldn't go. Of course, you should go there too, but you should be as open enough, I would say, to also go to events which are not crypto-centered.
Yeah, I had that moment at ETH Denver this past week. I went to a Farcaster meetup, and this is the second time I've been to a Farcaster meetup where these were some of the best conversations I've had in some of the blockchain crypto meetups I've been to in the past few years, largely because we were talking about everything but blockchain and crypto. We got to talk about the world, philosophy, medicine, health, interpersonal relationships. And these are the conversations that stand out so much from the Farcaster meetups that when you go to a Bitcoin or a crypto meetup or a blockchain meetup, it's always so singular. It's always so focused on a very specific topic. So it's really interesting to hear, like, this is why you choose to go to South by Southwest. I kind of want to pull on that thread a little bit because, as you mentioned, with GDPR, the right to be forgotten, you went through these kind of like growing pains of figuring out what data you had and who it was attributed to. So I'm curious, from somebody who spends so much time of their day-to-day working in the identity space, what are some other kind of concerns or areas of focus that you have? And they may be crypto related, they may not be, but we have so many different touch points when it comes to identification in both the physical and in the virtual world. So maybe you can just take a moment to share from your perspective where identity touches all of us and how it impacts our day-to-day lives. And then maybe we can use that experience to hone in a little bit more onto Kilt.
Yeah. So identity and identification are two totally different things. That's the first thing. Identification is just, I prove I am I. Yeah. So I can do that with many things. So you need an identifier for that. And an identifier in the real world are things like, for example, your fingerprint or your signature. And then you have identified yourself. But that's not really data. That's an interaction that you have, which is also nice and used a lot. But identity goes a little bit beyond that. Identity is not only what I say about me, like I'm Ingo, and I can prove that I'm Ingo with my thumb. It is also what other people say about me. And here it becomes interesting. Because if other people, like the DMV, says I'm entitled to drive a car, then I can drive a car. This is not me saying I can drive a car, or not me saying I'm Ingo. This is someone else saying I can drive a car. This is identity, because then I'm Ingo who can drive a car. And if I'm Ingo who can drive a car and has a fishing license and can go to this lake and pull out all the fish that he likes, and also have a university degree, which I can use to apply for an interesting job, for example, and then I have this key card which opens my hotel room, which is also part of my identity because I'm the guy who can open the door, hopefully the only one, and tonight who's sleeping there together with my driver's license and my fishing license and my university degree and stuff like that makes a person, right? When it is possible to accumulate this data, then you can make a profile for persons. And this is what you don't want for other people to do because they get power over you. Normally, the identity should be something that you own and that you only partially disclose to different people. And this is what we actually have in the real world, which is fantastic because we have all those documents, right? I have my driver's license, I have my university degree. If the policeman stops me with a car, I'm not going to show him my high school diploma or something like that, right? I'm going to show him just this one thing, and he doesn't need to know anything more about me. And if I want to use the same credential, which is the driver's license, to get into a bar in the US, I can even go so far to put my finger over the name because the bouncer does not need to know what my name is. He only needs to know what my date of birth is, and he has to see that the picture on the credential matches the guy standing in front of him, which is the identification part. So that is the identification, but identity is much more. And so we have actually a pretty good concept in the physical world for the last 500 years, which we never think about because it's just so efficient. And then we went to the internet and it all went broke because there we have the big Facebooks and Twitters, which collect a lot of our data. And this is all then not in my pocket. It's all in their pocket. And here it becomes dangerous because they can relate the different data to each other, make profiles, sell those profiles, make profit on that, potentially give them to the wrong people, right? And that is also really important. So I'm from Germany, so we always are a little bit cautious on data collection because we had 80 years ago, there was big problems in this country. So they didn't have computers, lucky. But if they had Facebook or Google or something which collects all the data, it would have been so easy for them to actually find out the people they don't like and put them somewhere where they don't want to be. And so it becomes really dangerous also on that level. And this is why we look into things. So we do have a lot of laws like GDPR and stuff like that. So that's not so easy to collect data, but still it would be much better if you just own your own data. That's the simplest thing. It is just decentralization. And this is why I like blockchain, because it decentralizes the data. And as long as I own the data and I willingly disclose parts of that to people, then I feel much safer than giving just everything to one entity and say they are going to take care of my data. They're going to be good to me. Maybe not.
So I'm going to give a little preamble, but ultimately I'm going to end up asking, what do we do to get people to care about data and their identity and ID and identification? When I was in college 20 years ago, we were even talking about the average American family, the amount of data that they share as an average unit of 4 could surmount to approximately $20,000 a year in additional income if they owned that data and then they themselves sold it to the companies that buy it and use that data to advertise on behalf of that familial unit of 4. And that was just 20 years ago. In the 20 years since, I still don't see people caring about the fact that their data is used to sell their information to be sold, for companies to use to target them for advertising and things of this nature. And if we even go more granular and we go into the physical realm, so that was the virtual, but now in the physical realm, when people go to a bar and they want to verify that they're 21 in the States or maybe 18 in other parts of the world. They show their ID and they're not upset that the bartender is seeing their address, is seeing their date of birth, is seeing their name. This is just not something that the average person cares about. Even when you put something as large as a price tag of $20,000 per year in your data that's being sold to companies. So, how do you think we get people to care about these issues? Because the average person doesn't until they have to, until they do. So what's like the uphill battle that you think we're facing to get people to be concerned about their physical and virtual identity concerns?
The first thing, you shouldn't make it too complicated for people to actually jump over. And another thing is that you shouldn't start at the individual. So making signposts out there like, take care of your data is not going to have any effect. Especially also the $20,000, I think, are completely exaggerated. So we calculated that the Facebook user is worth like $72 per year or something. So it's not really 2,000, but it's maybe 200 rather. You can't live off that. So as long as you can't live off that, then it's not interesting for people, especially if they have more burdens with that. You always have to start with industry players who actually offer these possibilities and make them attractive to people. And then it is a very slow education. Things sometimes have to go wrong. I think that we have a lot of data theft already. That does not seem to be enough. But let's just take one country starting to follow people. And then this country is going to be very much aware of these things later. So I think we need to see catastrophes first. And we don't have to catch everyone as well. If you ask people if they feel safe with their data at Facebook, then 90% of the people say, no, I don't. If you ask the same round of people if they are willing to do anything against it, then 90% say, no, we don't. So basically, there's a discrepancy. So they don't really see the potential damage that's going to happen. But where can we start? We can start with the 10% who are actually willing to do something against that. And at one point, they will see that they have an advantage over the others. And the other ones will see, why do those people have an advantage over me? So they cannot be deported or whatever is going to happen. And I think we live in very interesting times, especially for these things currently, especially in the US. So I think a lot of really nasty things are going to happen or are already happening. And the idea about why was my identity actually stored in central places is going to be more interesting. Just takes time. It is a logical thing because from a computer scientist standpoint, we had a very good solution in the physical realm. And then we moved into the digital realm where we should actually progress, and we did not. We made a step back in the freedom of the people. And this is where you have to work on. I think so. I'm happy to work on that because I think it is necessary. But I'm not a missionary. I'm not going to tell everyone, you have to use that now because otherwise, whatever, I'm really mad at you. So this is not going to happen. The first step that you have to do to make it possible, right? If you just talk about it and say, yeah, it should be so much better, and there's no possibility to actually do that and use this, then there's no chance. So what can I do as a computer scientist? I can deliver a system which allows it. That's already cool. And then catastrophes have to happen at one point. People have to see the advantages or disadvantages of not using it. All this takes a lot of time. But I'm not really going to take this uphill battle. It is for me fine when I already put the software out.
So I think maybe we've identified like the concerns and considerations that might spark this awareness in society. And you mentioned that it's only a small subset of society, 10% or so, that might actually care right now. Maybe we're ultimately entering a world where more people do realize there are issues with centralized solutions. Maybe they do realize that back when we were using paper and paper only, it was a lot better, maybe less centralized than what we see today with data companies that can aggregate all our data and identity solutions. Maybe you can use this moment to talk about further the power that blockchain and the power that decentralized solutions offer the individual. And maybe we can also expand into larger groups, be it institutions or governments or companies. What is the power that decentralization offers these various different entities when it comes to identity?
I think in general, it's always the same thing. What blockchains offer, you can look at it from two or three sides. Some people go into blockchain or use blockchain because they want transparency. But transparency is exactly the thing that you don't want in identity, right? You don't want to have all the data readable for everyone. But transparency can be really important for governments and so on if they want to show that they did not waste the money and whatnot. So here we see a lot of projects coming up and they touch identity on one or two sides, but transparency is important. Another thing which comes with blockchain, which is also really important, I think, is resilience. You see that in industry projects very often because databases can crash, databases can be unavailable, blockchains cannot be switched off by anyone. So when you look at the defense sector, for example, we're working a lot with the defense sector lately. What they want is resilient system. They don't want a database that sits in the headquarters. If somebody puts a bomb on the headquarters, then the database is lost and they don't know where everyone is. They want a resilient system so that you can throw 20 bombs on it, still it works and is accessible. So this is really important. Also, in terms of identity, so if you want to identify someone to actually come to an event or be able to do a task or something, you don't want to see 404 service not available, right? You don't want that. So you need resilient systems. That's one of the things that's also important for blockchain, which comes out of blockchain. The other thing, which is, I think, really important and what's the core feature of blockchain is basically that it replaces trust with truth. And that's the important point, right? When you have a middleman, you have that in many applications. So, for example, in identity, if you have between a shop and the consumer, if you have a Twitter, Facebook, something in between which actually forwards the data, then the shop does not have the customer relationship. The customer doesn't have the real relationship to the shop owner. Somehow it goes in the middle, the data is collected and potentially sold. What you can get with blockchain is actually the direct connection through the two, because you don't need the trust entity in the middle anymore. Because the blockchain produces truth. This is just the simplest thing with Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin, they can explain that very easily. When I send you $100, I will send that through my bank, and my bank will send it through another bank to your bank, and then somehow there will be 100 on your account. And that basically says, actually, is money being moved? If you trust your bank, maybe they give you the 100. So that's the trust system. While when I send you 0.01 Bitcoin, which is probably roughly the same, then it will be on the blockchain that I sent it to you, and it's actually yours, right? And there's no one in it. So it is truth. It is the mathematical truth. And that brings a lot of nice features with it, which are also important in identity solutions in the end, because you want to know if a person actually exists, if this signature is actually this person. So there's truth elements in there. And I think that's where it becomes really interesting with blockchain. Identity cannot work without trust. Because, as I said in the beginning, you always have this, what other people say about me, right? So when the policeman comes and says, show me your driver's license, and then I show him a driver's license, but I have drawn that myself, then he probably wouldn't accept it. He will only accept it if it is issued by an entity that he trusts. So here we need actually trust. This is what makes my work really interesting, because we are in an environment where we cannot really rule out 100% of the trust, because you always need the trusted entities which issue those credentials in a digital way, but we can still make the proof that this thing is valid. We can put that on a trustless system on a blockchain. And here it becomes interesting because it is connecting the two worlds of trust and truth.
So you said earlier, maybe at the beginning of the conversation or before we hit record, that you're currently on the road, you're doing sales, and you also just mentioned that a lot of the folks you're chatting with are defense entities because they like the immutability, they like the liveliness that blockchain networks offer.
They love the resilience.
Correct. So I guess maybe then I'm a little curious. Who do you find you're having the most, generally speaking, conversations with? Is it with entities that are looking for the resilience that Web3 offers? Or is it with Web3 individuals, Web3 users, and you're trying to show them why identity is important?
We come from a different angle. We always ask people what their problems are. And sometimes those problems can be solved with a blockchain. Sometimes they are in the identity field. And then we think about it and see if we can solve their problems probably with what we have. If we don't, then we're not going to sell them anything. But if someone comes and has an issue And this problem could be solved with, for example, the Kilt blockchain. Then we're going to sketch out a project for them, and then they might be happy, and then they might want it. This is how we go. We're not coming from, we have a solution, now let's find the problem. We try to find problems and see if the solution that we have actually matches, and then make projects out of it. This is why I'm at the South by Southwest, because the people who are my target group don't even know what a blockchain is. They just want a really resilient system, for example. And say, yeah, this is actually, there was an invention like 15 years ago. Somebody invented something which is so resilient, never seen that before. And then they are interested. You don't have to tell them it's a blockchain. You tell them it's a distributed ledger. And then they're not afraid of it because it's not related to meme coins and things that people are afraid of, because it's then just a technology. And if you say we have these things called DIDs and verifiable credentials, which is an international standard, which came out from the W3C, so which is definitely not a blockchain organization, and we have an implementation of that, then you can start talking to government, you can start talking to industry, and then people really getting interested in what you have to say because you can solve their problem, which is so much better than saying, we have a blockchain here, do you have a problem for us? So we're trying to do that the other way around. That takes forever, I know, but I think it is the right approach because it's probably the way that we can finally make the connection between industry, government, and the technology that we produce.
Can I just ask you for a moment to explain for folks who might have never heard of W3C or decentralized identifiers? Can you just really quickly give like an Eli 5 of what the entity is and what decentralized identifiers are?
So I think it was in 2016 when people started writing books about, the identity thing is broken in the internet. Really nice books. And, the internet actually has become very centralized, and that wasn't intended because actually it was like, hey, free for everyone. But then people found out, actually, if you have a really good solution in the internet, like a really good search engine, then people go to your search engine, and then the name of your search engine ends up in the dictionary because now we're not searching in the internet, we're Googling, right? And that gives a lot of power to the people who own this brand. And so that was not intended by the people who built the internet, and identity is broken as well. So they said we have to do something against that. And then an organization was founded called the DIF, the Decentralized Identity Foundation. That included the American government, IBM, Microsoft, 300 other companies, also my company. So we all sat together and said, we have to solve this thing together. Why together? Because if we solve it just us, then nobody's going to use it because that does not give any investment security. You need to standardize how identity looks in the digital world, like a sheet of paper. The sheet of paper is always the same size. This is why you can build a printer. Otherwise, you couldn't build a printer if they were like random, right? It wouldn't work. So you need a standardization of the size of this thing, and so you need a standardization of how does in the digital world actually an identity look. So we all came together and said, we are going to define that, and we have that as an international standard. That started in 2017. I joined it in 2018. And then we sat there until, I think, 2020. And then we had the feeling that basically it's quite good what we have. So that was more than 1,000 scientists sitting together all over the world and absolutely crazy work. And then we said, okay, now the industry has built the standard, but now we need a stamp on it. And then we went to the W3F, that is the World Wide Web Consortium. This is the people who also standardized things like HTTP. So everyone uses HTTP every day. If you want to go somewhere for digital and have a stamp, you go there. It's really interesting to go there because they are dominated by Facebook and Google. And Facebook was really not into it. So they didn't want the standardization for decentralized identity. But in the end, Google helped a lot, and then it came to work. So since 2021, I think we have officially the standardization. And what that does is it gives people the security. It gives also governments the security that if they build software or buy software which adheres to the standard, then they did a good investment because this is going to prevail because we need digital identity in some way. If anyone is going to go into this field, they're going to use the standard. It's like if you want to build a printer, probably you use the paper size which is already there. This is why we needed the standard. And that was really a lot of work. But now it is there, and now we see DIDs and verifiable credentials getting picked up by different countries. For example, the Department of Homeland Security is going to issue passports or identity cards for American citizens in DID and verifiable credential format. So that's going to have a huge impact on Middle America, Central America, South America, because the US acts as an example there. We see that also in Southeast Asia coming up. We see companies like Deloitte, which we work together a lot, coming up with using DIDs and verifiable credentials. So this is also a slow process, but it is happening because it is the standard how you make identity in the internet.
Very cool. Thank you for going into that and sharing a brief background about standardization, which is supremely important, especially when coming up with new protocols for the rest of the world to adopt. I'm curious to hear a little bit about Kilt's perspective on blockchain networks. How does Kilt evaluate which blockchain networks to support? What are the blockchain networks that Kilt supports? And what are the kind of differences between blockchains that you guys did opt to integrate and operate on top of, maybe versus some others that you don't need to name, and why you chose not to go with other blockchain networks?
Well, we only say positive things. So we are native Polkadot. We came from the Polkadot ecosystem. We wrote it all up, what we want to do. And then we had a vision of what we want to implement. And then we first went to potential customers, to the entities of countries which, for example, print the passports. We talked with them and they said, oh, this is really modern, really interesting. How much does it cost? I say, yeah, we're probably going to do it on Ethereum. And then, unfortunately, we cannot really tell you what it costs because there's gas, and the gas sometimes costs this. And then they said, this is not a product that we can use because we need to calculate the production cost. And if you can't calculate the production cost, there's the door. So we said, we have to control the production cost. So we have, in the end, somehow to build our own blockchain. In 2018, there were not too many frameworks for building blockchains. Basically, Substrate was coming up. That's the thing that Polkadot is built on. So we said, okay, guys, we're going to work with you. They lived in the same city. Perfect. We can even go out and have a drink together and ask questions. It was a very small ecosystem at the time. So if you probably know Gavin Wood, I think you interviewed Fabi. Fabi was already there, but because it was not documented, if you had a question, there you could go into Element and just ask the question, and Gavin was going to answer in 5 minutes. So it was fantastic, small and nice. So we felt really well. On the long run, so Kilt is still a parachain to Polkadot. So we are always going to be friends with Polkadot. But there's certain entities out there which already have software, like banks, for example, who want to work with the stuff, and they want us to integrate in their existing software. This software very often runs on Ethereum because they started early as well, and Ethereum was the thing where you build your software. So we have to also cater for them. So what we're currently supporting is Polkadot, of course. Kilt is native Polkadot, but we also support Ethereum now. We also support Base, and that's basically what we support currently.
Cool. Yeah, it's really nice to see the shout out to a former Smart Economy podcast guest. Fabian Gompf was a very fun conversation. Really cool to kind of hear the ties that Kilt has with that ecosystem. Also, Polkadot was probably the best party that I went to last year at Consensus in Austin. So shout out to the Polkadot team. So I want to talk a little bit about the 4 primary products that Kilt offers. I'm sure that there's a lot of overlap between them. There's a wallet, there's social KYC, there's W3N, and there's DID sign. So maybe let's just start with social KYC. What is social KYC, and how does it operate as the passport that you guys intend for it to be for the open web?
So maybe for those products, yes, but they are not made like we want to get rich on those products. So we are building the underlying technology, but it's really hard to see a blockchain working. So if you want to demonstrate it, you basically need something how you demonstrate it. And this is why we built those products. So there's no commercial background behind these products. Sometimes we actually don't want people to use the products. If you see the wallet, you probably have seen the wallet, it's called Sporan. Beautiful name, but the ugliest wallet that you have ever seen. That was on purpose because we don't want people to rely on that wallet. We just want to show how an identity wallet would look like, because the wallet that you have in your pocket, that holds maybe a little bit of coins, but it also holds your credentials, right? Your driver's license and stuff like that. And this is what Sporan is, but we're not going to sell it. We want people to build their own wallets. We made it open source so that you can take it apart and build your own wallet. And this is what other people are doing. When you look at the Deloitte website, they also have a wallet for holding your credentials, for example. That is based on Sporan, but it looks much better than what we have built. But the question was about social KYC. The social KYC is intended for internet people, I would say. So KYC, everyone knows what a KYC is. That is like know your customer, you take your passport or your ID card, You wiggle that a little bit in front of a camera, and then somebody says, yeah, this is obviously you, and then they issue some kind of a credential to you, and then you're KYC, then you can play with this one bank. That is always on state-issued credentials, like the passport. So in the internet, there might be cases where this is absolutely worthless and where you want to stay anonymous from that as well at the same time. Example, like gaming. So if I play massive multiplayer online games with a guy in China, for example, and he cheats me in whatever form, he steals something from me, so he seems to be dangerous. So shall I call the Chinese police and say, hey, this guy KYC'd to me, please go to the home and bring my sword back or my potion? That's not going to work. But if I know who this guy is in the internet, I have much more power over him. So let's give people the possibility to identify not with the state credential, but with things that are important in the internet. Like, this is this person with this email address. This is this person with this Twitter account. This is this person with this GitHub account, and so on. Because if I have all that and this guy from China cheats me, I can go on Twitter and say, this guy is dangerous, don't play with him. That's going to damage him a lot, right? So he's hopefully not doing it again then anymore. So I have a greater power without the KYC than I would have with the KYC. And still, this guy can stay anonymous, and I can stay anonymous at the same time. So this is what social KYC is about. It issues credentials to you, checking if you actually own an account. So, for example, you go into social KYC, you say, I'm this and this on Twitter. Then social KYC tells you, okay, please prove by tweeting this line. Then you tweet this line. Social KYC looks into Twitter. If you actually tweeted this line, then you obviously have control over the Twitter account. Then you get a credential which you can store in your identity wallet saying you own exactly this Twitter account. And then you go again and make this with your Facebook account and make this with your email address and so on. And then someone who wants to play with you can say, I need 3 social KYC credentials from you to actually trust you who you are. This is what social KYC is about.
So I appreciate that Kilt created the products not for productization and to drive revenue, but rather to show what can be done with these tools and these solutions, because blockchain can be such an abstract concept. So it's really cool to hear how Deloitte built their wallet and integrated credentials using Sporan as an initial use case. So maybe we don't have to double down on all the products that are listed on the Kilt website, but maybe we can just hone in a little bit on W3N. I think what was super interesting is that the naming service aims to improve the usability of wallet addresses across different networks. So maybe what are the opportunities and constraints that you might face as an identity solution when there's different naming service protocols on different blockchains? What makes it difficult? And what makes unique opportunities when you have to start connecting ENSs on different networks and different decentralized identifiers?
Yeah, so I was never happy with ENS because I'm a computer scientist, and ENS is so wrong in many ways. We thought maybe we can do a little bit better than ENS because we have this concept of the DID. The DID is more than a crypto address, and ENS is always linked to a crypto address. But a crypto address is something that lives on the Ethereum network. It would be a little bit like connecting your name to your bank account, actually. So first is the bank account, and then you connect your name to it. And then you do everything with your bank account, basically. Interacting with people, sending messages with people. You can identify me with my bank account. This feels wrong, right? So it should start one abstraction level on top of that. And this is what DIDs are. A DID is a unique identifier where I own the private keys to, so I can make the signatures, so I can identify with the signatures. But everything around it is unique and is owned by me. And of course, the idea I can add many crypto addresses. Like, this is my Ethereum address number 1, this is my Ethereum address number 2, this is my Polkadot address, this is my base address. And then this is connected to me. And then I can add to that also my name. And when I can add a human readable name, this is a one-to-one connection to the DID. And the connection between the DID and the crypto addresses is 1 to n. So I'm abstracting away from I am identified with my crypto address. I'm a person who lives only on Ethereum or only on Polkadot. I'm a person who lives in the broader internet, I would say. And what's cool about the W3N is actually that's not connecting to a crypto address, it's connected to a DID.
Cool. As we zoom out, building in blockchain, 1 year feels like 7 years. So to be building since 2018 is like half a lifetime. So what are some of the differences that you've seen in this industry when you first started building in 2018? And what are some things that have kind of just like, I don't want to say caught you by surprise. Where are we today versus where you thought we would be in 2018? How have things progressed? How have you guys had to adapt when it comes to identity online and on chain? Just really curious to hear any insights.
So when we started in 2018, so Berlin in blockchain 2018 was fantastic because that was the center of the world, right? It was where Ethereum was built. It was where Polkadot was built. It was where Cosmos was built. All the builders were there. The crazy people who sit on dirty sofas with their laptops and just do crazy stuff. That was the fantastic life, the scientific life also, which I wanted to have, and where I said a C-level thing in the industry gives you a lot of money and fame. And so I'm going to trade that all for sitting on that sofa because I want to be with those guys. And that was very much the 2018 feeling. This went away very much when some of the guys on the sofa became very rich and moved away for not paying taxes and not programming anymore, but doing drugs or whatnot. And then a new generation of people came in who said, okay, there were some people who just got rich. Can I also get rich? And then this went into a spiral of a lot of people who just wanted to get rich and not really doing the cool stuff anymore. This is how Polkadot still is. What Gavin is building in Polkadot with Jam is, again, the next generation of blockchain now. So these are the things where I came for. And this is so beautiful because there's so much brain going into that. And it's so nice to see that we have this Jam Tour now, which goes from university to university, starting in Cambridge, currently they're in China. They're basically picking up the best people from all the universities for sitting on dirty sofas and starting all over again. This is so fantastic. And this is so much fun. And would have imagined in 2018 that it always stays like that. And it didn't. So that is what frustrates me a little bit. It was too much about the money at one point. I know money is important. I also like money, totally not against it, but it became too much focused on the money and not on the science. And the science that we do in blockchain is beautiful. And there's so many people out there who don't really care about that. And that's sad.
Something that kind of blew my mind at Consensus last year was starting to go to all these AI talks. And I believe it was from Theoric, where somebody mentioned that we focused, especially since sitting on the dirty sofas in 2018, we really focused on onboarding the first billion users. And last year at this talk, my mind was kind of warped when one of the AI companies said that the first billion users might not even be human anymore. The wallets might be owned by AI agents. So how has AI tweaked what you're focusing on at Kilt, maybe thrown a wrench into your plans? Or how are you adapting and preparing for a world where there is also AI entities, some we might trust, some we might not trust? And how does this kind of increase the complexity of ensuring that someone we're listening to, some content we consume is indeed a human or even good AI agent and not a malicious AI agent?
I would actually love to have another hour for that, because that is really something that I'm thinking about for the last 2 years. And we're also published a little bit on Twitter and LinkedIn about that. So in very short, if you give power to an AI agent, which you do if you share your private keys with it, right? So if you want the agent to do something for you, buy a cryptocurrency or sell a cryptocurrency, they're basically using your money to do things. Then this agent should have some agency, right? They should be responsible for what they do. They should be liable for what they do in the end. And this means you need to identify them first, and they need to have credentials by others, saying, for example, this is a good agent, we checked it, it went through an audit and something like that. So you will trust this maybe a little bit more to handle your money. But if something goes wrong, you want to sue the agent. And this is what we're thinking about a lot currently, how you can do that. And there are really nice possibilities, but this is where verifiable credentials and DIDs actually come in very handy. So for us, it is just a new line of business, the AI agents. So very interesting stuff. where we can actually do good things, because nobody seems to think about these things. They just think about how they can transport the AI agent from one blockchain to another. It's also really interesting. But you need either truth or trust in the system, and that is currently not existing.
I implore anyone who's listening to this who's interested in this subject to go follow Ingo on Twitter or follow the team's LinkedIn, because they are starting to release some really interesting articles that are delving into the overlap between these two areas. So as we run up on the hour, what's next for Kilt? What's on the short or medium term roadmap?
Yeah, ask the people from the Kilt Foundation, because I'm just from the commercial company, so I cannot really speak about everything that Kilt wants to do. So what I'm currently doing, where I spend like probably 70% of my time, is actually flying around and also using trains to talk to industry players and governments and get them on board in very long-term projects. So this is nothing which is going to materialize tomorrow morning, but we have a lot of really interesting leads that we're working on. The appetite is starting to grow because people see issues in identity, but also in trust and in resilience and so on. So blockchain as a solution is coming up. So we feel pretty comfortable and confident that we're doing a lot of great things. And this is what I personally focus on. There's lots of other things which come up with Kilt. Bonding curves is, I think, the hottest thing that we have built in the last year, I would say. It's not live yet, but it's live on a testnet. It's going to go live in the next couple of weeks. It's an absolutely crazy thing which you can use to build decentralized autonomous organizations and stuff like that, with all the identity features in that. Absolutely fantastic. But this is not what I'm selling currently. So what I'm selling is the basics, basically, and then we do a lot for the community so that they can also be happy about getting the new crazy shit from Kilt as well.
So what's the best way that somebody can reach out to you and contact you?
For Kilt, we do have a Telegram group, I would say. It's called Kilt Official, if you want to reach the community. If you want to reach me, I would say Twitter is probably the best. I'm looking into Twitter.
Awesome. Ingo, thank you so much for your time today. It was a pleasure to delve into decentralized identity, the difference between identity and identification, and just to chat about the subject matter with you. It was a great hour.
Thank you very much for having me. It also was a lot of fun for me.
Awesome. Well, safe travels to South by Southwest, and I'll be keeping my eyes peeled to your Twitter account to see any new and interesting conversations you might have had there.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Smart Economy podcast. To stay in the loop with all our latest episodes and insights, head over to www.smarteconomypodcast.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for all of our video content. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please consider showing your support by liking, commenting, and reviewing this episode on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and bring even better content your way. We'd also love to hear from you, so please drop a comment on Spotify or YouTube to share what topics you'd like us to cover or who you'd like to see as our next guest. And if you or someone you know would make a great guest, please feel free to reach out. We're always looking for fresh voices or new perspectives. For our NEO token holders out there, please consider voting for NEO News Today as your council representative. We've proudly been serving the NEO ecosystem since 2017, and will continue to do so by putting portions of our council rewards directly back into ecosystem growth initiatives. So thanks again, one more time, for taking the time to listen to the Smart Economy podcast. We cannot wait to catch up with you next time.